Hello, dear students. In the last classes, we were discussing about Come September, the powerful lecture Arundhati Roy delivered in New Mexico. So let's begin. In a country like India, the structural adjustment end of the corporate globalization project is ripping through people's lives. Structural adjustment programs that consist of loans provided by a monetary fund and the World Bank to countries that have economic crisis, and its proper purpose is to adjust economic structure of that country, and it is a series of economic policies, and it is closely related to economy, and the people get more money, but huge interest payments is there to be paid to the loan taken, and these huge interest makes the richest to be more richer and poor people to be more poorer. And she says that the structural adjustment end of corporate globalization affected people's life. Development projects, massive privatization, labor reforms, certain labor reforms or privatization, and the development projects, the labor reforms like contract labor, in which the people are forced to work in hazardous industries with little facilities and security, and this contract labor belongs to the weaker section of society, and these people will be denied benefits that are there for other employees. And it has been said that some labor reforms may lead people to work in slave like conditions. And the huge development projects of industries, of globalization, and the privatization of the industries, labor reforms pushes people off from their lands, because their lands are used by the corporate world to build their industries up, and pushes people out of their jobs, and it results in a kind of barbaric dispossession that has few parallels in history. Arundhati Roy states that these people were deprived of their own land, and it is barbaric. It is a barbaric act. It is really cruel and brutish. Across the world, as the free market brazenly protects Western markets and forces developing countries to lift their trade barriers, the poor are getting poorer and the rich richer. Through free market, rich countries are getting more rich and poor countries becoming more poorer. Civil unrest has begun to erupt in the global village. Civil unrest, it is not only the protest from the people against the globalization. In countries like Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Bolivia, South American countries, and India, the resistance movements against corporate globalization that supports only the Western countries, only the richer countries are growing. Resistance is growing. To contain them, governments are tightening their control. Government is also tightening their control on this resistance. And how do they do that? How do the governments resist the resistance of the people who are against corporate globalization? They call them as terrorists. Protesters against the corporate globalization are being labeled terrorist by the government and then being dealt with as such. Then from then on, they are being labeled as terrorist, In a prejudiced mind, people will analyze them like that against the country, which the people that can cause terror to others. But Arundhati Roy continues that civil unrest doesn't only mean marches, demonstrations, and protest against globalization. It is not the resistance of marching or protesting against globalization, but it has gone beyond that. Unfortunately, it also means a desperate downward spiral into crime and chaos and all kinds of despair and disillusionment, which we know from history and from what we see unspooling before our eyes. She says that this resistance became a new way, resistance has turned into a new kind, people getting involved in crime and chaos from all their disillusionment and despair conditions. This is also a form of protest, but actually it will it is it will create a lot of problems in that country itself. The society gets threatened, gradually becomes a fertile breeding ground for terrible things, and the poorer countries will witness a lot of terrible things in their places itself. It is actually a protest against the corporate globalization. It is not in the form of marches, not in the form of demonstrations, but it has turned into a different form. It has become a protest. People became involved in crime, and the place, the country turned into chaotic. Cultural nationalism gradually becomes a fertile breeding ground for terrible things. And that place will see cultural nationalism upholding nationalistic or values of only a particular religion, particular section of people, religious bigotry, fascism, and of course, terrorism breeds from that places. Arundhati Roy says that the civil unrest becomes a fertile breeding ground for cultural nationalism, religious bigotry, a partiality towards one section of people or towards one religion. And she says fascism can also evolve, which supports dictatorial power, which suppresses the opposition. All these march arm in arm with corporate globalization. There is a notion gaining credence that the free market breaks down national barriers. She says that there is also another notion, that there is another belief that free market actually breaks down national barriers. There will not be any barriers for nations. The world is one without any national barriers, and that corporate globalization's ultimate destination is a hippie paradise that is promoting corporate globalization. It is ultimate destination is a hippie paradise, that there is only love and tolerance, and there is no war, everybody will be happy, like that. That there is a notion gaining, this notion is gaining importance in many about the free market in among many people, that national barriers will not be there, and corporate globalization's ultimate aim is like where there is no barriers, and heart is the only passport, and we all live happily together inside a John Lennon song. Like John Lennon was a singer songwriter in America. His Imagine There's No Heaven, it's a very famous work. And like that, that is a very beautiful lyrics it got. Imagine there's no heaven, it's easy if you try, no hell before us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there is no countries, it is not hard to do, nothing to kill or die, for no religion. And two, he is talking about a place where everybody is living happily, there is no countries, all people living life in peace. And he's also saying, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I am not the only one. I hope somebody you will join us and the world will be as one. He's foreseeing a world where everybody is living happily, no barriers, national barriers. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can, no need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I am a dreamer, but I am not the only one. I hope someday you will join us and the world will live as one. He's talking about that world. And she says that imagine there is no country, like that corporate globalizations hold, they propagates this idea that there is no national barriers, and free market, this free market breaks down all national barriers. And she says, but this is just a rumor. This is a canard. This is just a rumor. Corporate globalization. Globalization becomes rampant in this world, and it is a global village now. But the fact is that profit is made by the richer countries, and poor people are becoming more poorer. Arundhati Roy continues, what the free market undermines is not national sovereignty but democracy. The free market actually threatens not the national sovereignty, not the power of the government, but the democracy. How? That is, as the disparity between rich and poor grows due to this corporate globalization, the hidden fist has its work cut out for it. The government supports the MNCs. The government supports the globalization, privatization. Multinational national corporations on the prowl for sweetheart deals that yield enormous profits cannot push through those deals and administer those projects in developing countries without the active connivance of state machinery, the police, the courts, sometimes even the army. She says that announces certain multinational companies, corporations announces certain deals that actually yield enormous profits for the MNCs only. These MNCs actually control these projects in developing countries, and without any active involvement of the government, without any active involvement of the police, the courts. Arundhati Roy states that today corporate globalization, to make more money, to be in power, they need an international confederation of loyal, corrupt, preferably authoritarian government. Corporate globalization needs a government that supports them. This is the viewpoint of Arundhati Roy. Needs an international confederation of loyal, corrupt, preferably authoritarian governments in poorer countries. For what they need a supportive government to push through unpopular reforms and quell the mutinies. To resist any protest from the people, they need government's support. They need an authoritarian government who stands for the corporate globalization. And she also says this corporate globalization needs a press, newspaper, or television that pretends to be free. Apparently, they are free, but the news they circulate, the image they circulate, truly supports MNCs and the government policies. Or the press is controlled by MNCs and the government. It needs corporate globalization, needs courts that pretend to dispense justice, but in a way they will also give injustice to the people. And corporate globalization needs nuclear bombs, standing armies, sterner immigration laws, watchful coastal patrols to make sure that it's only money, goods, paid, services that are being globalized, not the free movement of people, not a respect for human rights, not international treaties on racial discrimination or chemical change or chemical and nuclear weapons or greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, or God forbid justice. She says that the corporate globalization globalized money, goods, and some profitable services, not the other things, not the respect for human rights, not international treaties, and not free movements are globalized. She says that the international treaties which are signed for racial discrimination or nuclear weapons or about greenhouse gas emissions or treaties signed for climate change, these are not globalized. Only thing globalized is profit, profitable service, goods, and money. It's as though even a gesture towards international accountability would wreck the whole enterprise of corporate globalization. She continues, close to 1 year after the war against terror was officially flagged off in the ruins of Afghanistan from 2001 to 2002 to September, close to 1 year after the war against terror was officially flagged off in the ruins of Afghanistan by America, in country after country, what they do, freedoms are being curtailed. Freedoms are denied to the people. In the name of protecting freedom itself, freedoms are being curtailed. Freedoms are being reduced. Civil liberties are being suspended. The freedom of the people, civil liberties are being suspended in the name of protecting democracy. All kinds of dissent are being defined as terrorism. The disagreements against America, disagreement against their policies, those people are turned to be anti national or they are labeled under terrorism. All kinds of laws are being passed to deal with it. Osama bin Laden seems to have vanished into thin air. She speaks of 2002. Bin Laden was killed in 2011 by American forces itself. Mullah Omar is supposed to have made his escape on a motorbike. Mullah Omar, who led the Taliban and founded the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan in 1996. And he also joined the war against the Soviet Union. He was also involved in the September 11 attacks. When US invaded Afghanistan, it is being said he was moved to Pakistan and he died in 2013. She mocks the US government that they could have sent Tintin, the cartoon character, who is a adventurer who involves in dangerous cases. He takes heroic action, and she mocks the government that they could send this Tintin after him. Big laughter in the audience. The Taliban may have disappeared, but their spirit and their system of summary justice is surfacing in the unlikeliest of places. In India, in Pakistan, in Nigeria, in America, in all the Central Asian republics run by all manner of despots, and of course in Afghanistan under the US backed Northern Alliance. Arundhati Roy states that the Taliban may have disappeared, but their spirit and their system of the judicial action, the trials, unfair judgment, all those things are surfacing in the unlikeliest of places. It is there, the spirit is still there. In India, in Pakistan, in Nigeria, in America, in all the Central Asian republics, run by all manner of despots, In these countries, the people, the government is moreover like dictators. And of course, in Afghanistan, under the US backed Northern Alliance. She says that the spirit of Taliban can be there, spirit of Taliban appear to be there in the other places like India, Pakistan, Nigeria, America. That is their system of unfair judgment still is there in all these countries where it is in India and where we hope it is to be is a democratic country. But she says that the system of Taliban is there. The system of Taliban of unfair judgment is there in these countries. The system is adopted by the dictators, the rulers. The rulers appear to be democratic, but the system of unfair judgment is adopted by the rulers, the government itself. Meanwhile, down at the mall, there's a mid season sale. Everything is discounted there. Malls are known for its discounts. Oceans and rivers, oil, gene pools, fig wasp, flowers, childhood, aluminium factories, phone companies, wisdom, wilderness, civil rights, ecosystems. Air, all for 1,600 million years of evolution, she mocks. She says privatization has become so rampant in the society. Everything we are getting for money. Natural resources are being exploited. Oceans, rivers, oil, flowers, everything is getting exploited. Everything is under privatization. And she says that everything we get out of money. It's packed, scaled, tagged, valued, and available off the rack. No returns. As for justice, I am told it is on offer too. You can buy justice. Justice also there for sales. If you have money, justice is with you. You can get the best that money can buy. So this system actually profits the richer people only. The poor people continues to be humiliated, denied of their rights. They live and they are humiliated and they continue to live in their poor circumstances. Arundhati Roy continues. Donald Rumsfeld said that his mission in the war against terror was to persuade the world that Americans must be allowed to continue their way of life. He was an American politician, a government official, and a businessman who served as a Secretary of Defense from 1975 to 77 and from 2001 to 2006. So, when America started invading Afghanistan and Iraq, he was there. When America started invading Afghanistan, he was there. And he said that his mission, the mission of America in the war against terror, was to persuade the world that Americans must be allowed to continue their way of life. It poses, they say that the other nations poses a threat to America. The other nations, the nations that the Islamic terrorist groups, they are a threat to America, to American people. They must be allowed to continue their way of life, says Donald Rumsfeld. When the maddened king stamps his foot, speaks Arundhati Roy, when the maddened king stamps his foot, slaves tremble in their quarters. So, standing here today, it is hard for me to say this. And she is in America, New Mexico. She says that it is very hard for me to say this in the country. But the American way of life is simply not sustainable. She says that it cannot be maintained or it cannot be defended all the times because it doesn't acknowledge, the America is not acknowledging that there is a world beyond America. There are people living beyond America. Many people are living in inhuman conditions. They're just ignoring this fact. People are denied of their rights. Their resources are being exploited. And she reminds America that There is a world beyond America, a world there existing which have a right to live same as that of America. And there is a huge applause from the crowd. But fortunately, power has a shelf life. So she says that power, the power of America, the power of whatever be the institutions, they has a shelf life. It changes. The dominant power changes throughout the history. So there is a hope there. When the time comes, maybe this mighty empire of globalization of US government or US citizens, multinational companies like others before it, overreach itself and implode from within. It collapses within itself, corporate globalization. The world of MNCs, the power collapses itself. And she says that it looks as though structural cracks have already appeared as the war against terror casts its net wider and wider. America's corporate heart is hemorrhaging because for the war, money is required, money is being spent. So the corporate heart is hemorrhaging. Money of the corporate field or global field or MNCs are losing because of this war. For all the endless empty chatter about democracy, we all speak about democracy, democratic world, democratic nation. But she says that today the world is run by three of the most secretive institutions in the world. The world is controlled by three institutions. They are the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. And she says that all the three institutions are dominated by the United States. They have the strong control over all these institutions, and these institutions run the world. And she says that their decisions are made in secret. The people who head them are appointed behind closed doors. Nobody really knows anything about them. Their politics, their beliefs, their intentions are hidden from the world. Nobody elected them. Nobody said they could make decisions on our behalf. People in the world, people of other countries did not elected them, and they have not given the right to take the decisions of the world. But the world is run by these three institutions. And she says, a world run by a handful of greedy bankers of IMF or the World Bank and the CEO of the MNCs of the World Trade Organization, whom nobody elected, can't possibly last. They are not elected by the people, so they will not last for a longer time, warns Arundhati Roy. Soviet style communism failed not because it was intrinsically evil but because it was flawed. The power of Soviet Union did not last a longer time. Their communism failed, and she says that it was not because it was evil in nature, but it got certain defects, it got certain imperfections in it. What was that defect? It allowed too few people to usurp too much power. Dictatorial. Certain people usurped the power, usurped too much power. And she says that 21st century market capitalism, corporate globalism, American style will fail for the same reasons, because only few people are getting profits, and those people hold power within them. Both are edifices, market capitalism and the American style. These structures or systems are constructed by the human intelligence. They constructed it out of human intelligence, out of reason, undone by human nature. Human nature is not included. It is constructed out of human intelligence and it will fail, she warns. The time has come. Perhaps things will become worse and then better. Perhaps there is a small God up in heaven readying herself for us. She says that there is hope still left in the world. Perhaps there is a small God in heaven readying herself for us for a better world. There is a little hope left in the world. Small God, reference of goddess of small things. Her own work, Booker Prize work. Another world is not only possible, she's on her way. She's encouraging people, telling that there is a hope in this world still left. We are fragmented now, but there is a hope still left. She's on her way. She's readying herself for us. Maybe many of us won't be here to greet her. Maybe the good days will come later. We will not be here. People will not be here. We all people who are listening, the people who are listening, Arundhati Roy's speech would not be there because peace that times would be far ahead, would be so distant. But on a quiet day, if I listen very carefully, I can hear our breathing. Thank you, ends Arundhati Roy her speech. There was a huge applause from the audience. She says that she could hear her breathing. She is coming, the God is coming, and the things will be better in earth. The power structures will be changed. Everybody in this world will be living in a harmonious way. Basically, she is conveying the idea that there is hope for the world. And she says that that hope is not too far away. She thanks her audience. So we came to an end of Come September, this long speech delivered by Arundhati Roy in New Mexico, United States. She made her arguments against globalization, capitalism, hypocrisy of the United States, and she also showcases us about the disparity of rich and poor people, the power in this world, power vested in the hands of US government. And she also speak about the events of September and the relevance of the title September, Come September, because she has mentioned numerous issues, fights that was happening in the month of September, which was also started by the US government. And her language, she's used numerous puns, used numerous phrases, quotations, and she ends her essay with a hope for humanity. She presented her speech in a very clear, a poetic, but striking language, and the speech received a very warm applause, or you can say a thunderous applause from the audience. So, Come September was a very interesting work which opened us numerous ideas, numerous things that happened in history, that happened in the world, that are still continuing in this world. So, dear children, study well. Thank you.